Hello, welcome to my channel, Another Bibliophile Reads. My name is Greg, and I am here to do week number 9 update of the 100 book challenge. Now, if you're not familiar with this challenge, it was created by the evil mastermind Ali at the Criminali channel. And this is where you have to read 100 books that you already own before you can buy another book. There are some exemptions to the book buying ban, but I have none to show or display this week. But I will tell you what I have been reading. I started off reading a book on my Kindle. It is Looking for the Stranger by Alice Kaplin. Now, this is a literary criticism book / biography of Albert Camus on how he came to write and publish his most famous book, The Stranger. Now, The Stranger is one of my most beloved books that I have ever read. And so I was really happy to read through this and get all the details on how he came to write it, his influences, and the difficulties publishing it. He had to publish this during World War II, and let's just say it was not an easy task. Now, because I read that, I, of course, had to reread The Stranger. This is a book that I have read 6 or 7 times, maybe even 8 times, if you count the graphic novel adaptation. I have read it in the Matthew Ward translation and the Stuart Gilbert translation. I am not sufficiently fluent in French to read it in its original. But this Looking for a Stranger book just emphasized how great the final 2 chapters in each part of this book were. Now, at the end of part 1, the main character, Rasul, of course, commits his famous murder of the Arab on the beach because of the sun. And you feel that sun beating down on him. You can feel the pressure on his fingers as he pulls the trigger and what that does to his consciousness. And then it again ends with his confrontation of a priest in his jail cell. And again, this is a fabulous chapter. It is probably one of the most influential fiction chapters that I've ever read in my life, because his theory of religion is essentially the religious theory of religion that I've had ever since I read this at college. Also in this book, it discusses what other books he was writing at the time he was writing The Stranger, and there were 3 of them: The Stranger, The Myth of Sisyphus, and his play Caligula. Now, I reread I reread The Myth of Sisyphus last year on audiobook, so I'm not going to be rereading it, but I have not read this play since I was in college. There was a college class called Philosophy and Literature, and you got to read Camus, you got to read some Sartre, you got to read some Dostoevsky, and a couple other philosophical authors. So I have read this play before, but that was in the 80s, so a very, very long time ago. And this is an historical play about Caligula. Now, it starts off that Caligula's beloved sister Drusilla has just died, and he is struck with a piece of philosophical insight, and that is, men die, men are unhappy. And he believes in order to gain his happiness, he has to be able to own the moon, which is crazy because he cannot own the moon, and it just drives him crazier and crazier and crazier. And it ends with the historical murder of Caligula. It's a pretty good play. I'm glad I reread it. It's not the best play I've ever read, but it's well worth reading. And then I had an audiobook, and that was The Red Badge of Courage. Now, I happen to own The Red Badge of Courage in the Library of American edition, but I did listen to the audiobook. And the reason I wanted to reread this book is that I now live in Virginia, very close to some major Civil War historical areas. And I just want to get myself more familiar with the Civil War. Now, despite The Red Badge of Courage being perhaps one of the most famous Civil War novels ever written, it has very little to do with the Civil War. It is more about how men deal with bravery and cowardice in battle, and just what it feels like for a man to be in war. Now, that said, when Stephen Crane wrote this book, he was very unspecific about where this battle took place. He did mention the Rappahannock, and I happen to live very close to the Rappahannock, and many scholars believe that the battles described in this novel are the battles of Chancellorsville. So when the weather gets a little bit better, I intend to visit Chancellorsville and just sort of go up that battlefield with an eye, saying, could this be in the Red Badge of Courage, and give a more in-depth review of that novel. A second audiobook I listened to was The Dispatcher, and that is written by John Scalzi. He is a very popular science fiction author. I have read his science fiction novel, The Old Man's War, and that was mostly a good book, although I thought the ending was rather crappy. I don't remember the exact details, but it was just straining to produce a happy result in that novel that I just did not enjoy. Now, the basic plot of The Dispatcher, which I'm going to call a science fiction novel, is probably more closely related to a fantasy novel. In this novel, about 10 years ago, and it's basically modern times, a miracle has happened. If a person is murdered or killed by another human being, that person will disappear. The dead body will disappear and reappear in their home, buck naked, but alive, 13 to 30 hours younger from their state that they're murdered in. So if you are in an automobile accident and die, you do not get resurrected. If you die of natural causes, you do not get resurrected. If you die of did I say natural causes? I think I just said natural causes. The only way you will get resurrected is if another human being kills you. This, however, has some advantages. One is it's very hard for someone to murder another person. The second is, let's suppose you are in a critical automobile accident and you are flatlining it. An agent of the government called a dispatcher can kill you, and then you will be resurrected 13 to 30 hours younger. That means you will not have those critical injuries that you suffered in the automobile accident. If you are going through open heart surgery and that surgery does not go well, a dispatcher can kill you and you will be resurrected before your surgery began. Now, these dispatchers are government agents hired to humanely kill people and give them a second chance of life. But what happens is the main character is a dispatcher, and I forget his name already, but one of his best friends, who's also a dispatcher, has disappeared, and he is being requested by the police to help find him. Now, there are some dark undersides to this dispatching, and one of them was mentioned is there are, let's just say, sporting events where two people are given hammers and you get to hammer the other person to death, thereby killing them, therefore allowing that person to resurrect. And then you have a dispatcher working under the table to dispatch the murderer of the other victim so that person will be resurrected in a healthy body. Now, this is a crime noir novel, very much so. Again, I'm calling it science fiction, but it really is more fantasy. It is a fine little novella. It is about 2.5 hours long on audio. And the final book that I read this week, again, was heavily influenced by my reading of Looking for a Stranger, and that is The Postman Always Rings Twice by James M. Cain. This is a crime novel written in the early 30s, and it was the novel that heavily influenced Camus to write The Stranger. And this is one of the all-time great crime novels. If you have not read it and you like crime novels, you really do need to go out and get this book. I don't need to go into the plot that heavily, other than it's gritty, and it has just a great little ending. Although the critic in the Alice Kaplin says, really, the the critical end would not fly in a court of law. But you don't care in the book because it's such a great ending. So, what am I going to be reading next week? There are two events that are steering my book choices. One was about 2 weeks ago. I created a video, Have You Read It? And in that video, I read the opening passages from 4 novels that I had read before and want to reread. I did not say the title or say the author, and I allowed commenters to say which book sounds the best. And out of that 4, the novel Lee by Tito Perdue was chosen as the best of the 4. So I am going to be rereading that. It is the story of a 70-year-old man who is an avid reader. I do remember that he has read 10,000 books in his lifetime, and that 10,000 book goal is sort of a goal in my own life. I would love to read 10,000 books. So I'm going to reread this and just see if I want to hold on to that goal that this character Lee had achieved. The second book that I'm going to read is from the BookTube Spin number 5. And there were 2 choices. Book number 1, I am actually delaying until February because it is a fantasy book. And there is going to be a fantasy book group challenge, and I'm holding off. But number 2, if you know my channel, is Celeste, the Gold Coast Virgin. And I'm going to take the plunge this week and start reading it. This is a historical romance from 1949, and I know of no reviews on the internet of people who have claimed to have read this book. So I am guessing I am going to be the one and only reviewer of this book after I finish. If you know of another review, please let me know. I'd love to know what other people think. And that is week number 9. Thank you very much for watching. Have a good evening. Goodbye.